Steelers football to look forward to this week, and the buzz around Pittsburgh, for better or worse, could not be higher. My name is Donnie, joined alongside by my co-host Noah Strackmine. This is All Steelers Talk. Real quick before we dive deep into the Steelers' first preseason game of 2021, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel, All Steelers Talk. Give us a follow on Twitter at @SI_Steelers. Give us a like on Facebook, All Steelers on Sports Illustrated, and go ahead and view our work at allsteelers.com or si.com/NFL/Steelers. Basically, anywhere you can find anything written or anywhere you could listen to stuff, we are there, and we are here. It is game week for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like I mentioned before, there's a lot of buzz, a lot of questions that need to be answered for the Steelers. The first of 4 preseason games will be played this Thursday against the Dallas Cowboys in the Pro Football Hall of Fame game. Noah, you've been on training camp since day one. How are you feeling? Are you excited?
I'm excited. Pittsburgh Steelers football is back. I wish it wasn't back in the midst of me moving, but it's back. We're here. We're ready. And honestly, it's gearing up to be a good game. At the beginning of camp, we were looking at this and saying, this is Mason Rudolph versus Dak Prescott. Now it's, we have a couple of competitions going on. We really want to see what Dwayne Haskins has to bring. Najee Harris is probably going to get a good amount of snaps. So it's exciting times for Pittsburgh Steelers fans. And there's fans. Yeah,
fans nonetheless. And, of course there will be Steelers fans there. And, of course, there will be Cowboys fans there. So, take that with however many grains of salt that you wish. But I think you actually touched on the first point that we were going to talk on. Dwayne Haskins, the hype train might be coming off the rails right now. I mean, He's looked phenomenal in camp. I know that he's taking reps with the second team over Mason Rudolph. From my understanding, Mason Rudolph hasn't looked phenomenal at all. So my first question to you about, the discussion between Dwayne Haskins and Mason Rudolph, do you think it's an overreaction to think Dwayne Haskins could be quarterback 2 by the time the preseason's over?
No, I did at first. I did a couple of weeks ago. I thought Dwayne Haskins is here to be the number 3. Mason Rudolph is still the number 2. We know that. That's starting to change. And I don't know how much that's going to change because Mason Rudolph is still taking team 2 reps, most of the time. But there are times where Dwayne goes in there. And what was most surprising was the 2-minute drill to end Saturday's practice. It was Dwayne taking the reps behind Ben Roethlisberger instead of Mason Rudolph, after Friday's practice ended with Mason Rudolph going out there and losing a 2-minute drill when Haskins went in the next time and won a 2-minute drill. So I don't know how telling that is. I still think Mason gets the start if Ben does not play on Thursday. But Dwayne is a guy who, yes, most certainly by the end of the preseason, we could see as that number 2 guy.
And see, there's a very fine line between trying to deviate from, hey, this guy is having a really good training camp.
Oh, yeah.
And, hey, this guy really is legitimately talented. And, there's – obviously you don't want to, discredit anything anybody's done because up to this point it is all about taking the most, of your opportunities and, turning those into something legitimate. And, we haven't seen the Steelers play in an actual game yet against another team, live reps. They've only been playing against themselves. And after a certain amount of time, training camp is going to become redundant for a lot of these guys.
Plus, there's no offensive line.
There's no offensive line. But as somebody who would rather have Mason Rudolph over Dwayne Haskins starting if Ben Roethlisberger can't play, Dwayne Haskins has looked better, man. And I know it's training camp. I know a lot of people are not fans of overreacting to things that happen in practices, especially at the quarterback position, where a lot of these guys are just experimenting. They're trying to find out which windows they can fit certain, things through. Haskins has looked better, man. And, that was kind of the consensus throughout social media. It's been kind of consensus among actual media as well. Shout out to Meredith in the chat. Mason Rudolph has no pocket awareness. When I see him play, it's like his mental clock is broken.
It's true, though, and that's the big thing. I don't know what Dwayne is going to bring to the field over Mason Rudolph. I think that's something that we need to find out over time, because you could be as excited as you want about Dwayne Haskins and his potential. That's awesome. But Dwayne Haskins went to Washington and he was not good at all. And you could blame that on the team. You could blame that on the coach. You could blame that on his poor off the field decisions. Whatever you want to blame it on. He wasn't good. So now he comes to Pittsburgh and yeah, he's up against Mason Rudolph, who also isn't very good. And there's two guys competing to look better as a number 2. That's alarm number 1. They're only competing for number 2, and frankly, neither of them really look like a strong number 2. That being said, Dwayne Haskins carries so much potential that working as that number 2 behind Ben Roethlisberger could lead to way more than Mason Rudolph working behind Ben Roethlisberger. We've seen who Mason Rudolph can become. He's right here. Dwayne Haskins has the potential to be way up there. And that's the difference. So, yeah, there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of overreactions, and there should be. But Dwayne Haskins, at the end of the day, is not going to come in here and win anybody a Super Bowl right now. But next year, after learning from Ben Roethlisberger from a year, after learning from Matt Canada and working with some solid receivers, yeah, maybe.
I think, and I'm saying this as somebody who has been very adamant that whenever Ben Roethlisberger does retire, that Rudolph is going to get at least 1 year. At least 1 year to see, what he can do. I think the organization still is very adamant on that happening. I think this is only a good thing because, either two things are going to come from this. Number one, Dwayne Haskins is going to prove himself to be the better quarterback out of the two, and then he'll get that opportunity over Mason Rudolph. Or number two, that's going to push Mason Rudolph to become a better quarterback. There's no downside to competition, especially at the quarterback position, especially whenever we see Mason's track record isn't exactly phenomenal. Now, that being said, a lot can happen. We still haven't seen them play, a single preseason game yet. There's 4 left before Mike Tomlin really has to decide on the true depth chart, and we'll kind of go from there. But
I think
good.
I think that when you touched on a good point there, the competition. Mason Rudolph up until Saturday, I don't think felt any competition. He knew he was the number 2 and he kind of carried that swagger with him, which is fine. The quarterback should have confidence like that. But now that Dwayne is kind of catching him and it's becoming more of just a conversation and actually happening on the field, I think that kind of adds pressure for the first time in Mason Rudolph's entire career. Now, does that do anything? Yeah, like you said, it can make him way better. It could also make him way worse. And that's something that we have to see over time because, as we both know, Mason's not really a guy who's going to come in here under pressure and really his track record shows that playing under pressure is not his strong suit. So
yeah, and no offense to Devin Hodges, but Dwayne Haskins and Devin Hodges are two
different people, and it goes farther than this. This is the first time in Mason Rudolph's career where he's looking at this, and everyone's looking at this going, maybe Mason isn't the guy after Ben Roethlisberger, and that doesn't have to be forever. I don't think Mason Rudolph thought it was a forever thing. I thought he knew that when Ben retired, he's going to get his opportunity, just like you said. Now he has to earn that opportunity before Dwayne Haskins takes it away. That's the first time he's ever had pressure. Duck didn't present that same pressure.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, I feel like the 2019 season was kind of a free gimme year, Oh, man, did you want to take that?
Yeah. Shout out my boy Nick Salma out there, my guy. But he's right, Mason Rudolph. Look fans don't like him. I don't know how the players feel about him.
Fans hate him, bro.
Fans do hate Mason Rudolph.
And Mason Rudolph could walk on water and they would yell at him for not swimming.
Yeah, exactly.
Flipping to the defensive side of the ball, one of the very, very hot topics heading into the season was the cornerback position, especially with Steven Nelson being cut. When a lot of people thought Joe Hayden might have indeed been that guy. But nonetheless, Mike Hilton departs, and there is a lot of moving pieces. Nobody really knew what exactly to expect. I mean, people still want Xavier Howard to be traded, even though it's not really a true possibility. But nonetheless, heading into the first preseason game, Cam Sutton taking inside slot corner reps while James Pierre is, anchoring down the outside. The James Pierre hype train dating back to last year has been very true. The small piece of action we saw him play in 2020 was promising, I will say that. But, you never want to take a small sample size in the NFL and try to expect greater things from that. But nonetheless, I remember talking with you throughout the offseason, and we were going back and forth on what we think would be better, whether Cam Sutton should play on the inside, whether Cam Sutton should play on the outside. And it looks like for now, the best secondary outlook will be Pierre on the outside and will be Sutton on the inside. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you think Cam Sutton should play on the inside? How do you see James Pierre folding out? Like there's a lot to unpack here with the secondary.
There's a ton, and that's the part. So for the last couple of weeks, it's been Cameron Sutton versus Chase Claypool every day. That's when they go 7 shots in the end zone. That's the first play. Toss, fade to the back of the end zone to Chase Claypool on Sutton every day. And it was a pretty even match. Sometimes Chase would win. Sometimes Cam would win. I feel bad if Cam has to move to the inside because he wants so desperately to play that outside role. It's a more solidified role. But at the same time, he is a teammate who's going to say, okay, if you need me on the inside, I'm going to go play on the inside. And yes, they definitely need him on the inside. Antoine Brooks Jr. is a liability in coverage, a huge one. Arthur Millette is a huge liability overall. And Trey Norwood is playing safety. So your only option to go out there and say this is a guy that isn't going to lose a significant gap from Mike Hilton is going to be Cam Sutton. And James Pierre kind of earned that place at the same time because the last 3 days he's made an interception. He picked off Ben. 2 of them were in the end zone for pick sixes. I mean, the dude knows how to play ball. He's coming in here with a chip on his shoulder. I don't know how he went undrafted because since he showed up in Pittsburgh, he's looked good. I mean, he's just a guy that you should be excited about, and I think the coaches, the fans, and the team are more excited about him than they would be Brooks or Millette.
And here's the thing. No matter where you're at in the NFL, if you're talented, they're going to find a spot for you. Like,
yeah, exactly.
If you can play, you are going to play. And I think we're slowly finding that out with James Pierre. And obviously Cam Sutton, everybody loves Cam Sutton and what he can do. His versatility on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
Gives the Steelers a chess piece that, they haven't really had for a minute.
No, and then Trey Norwood could play the dime at the same time. If you trust Trey Norwood enough, I mean, you got to put pads on the guy first. But Trey Norwood is a guy who could come in here, play that dime Cam Sutton role, drop back to safety, kind of be that chess piece while Cam Sutton becomes the next Mike Hilton, which he's very capable of doing. And
I think that's another point, too. We're coming up on the Steelers' first preseason game. We don't know what these guys are going to look like. And I think people need to remember OTAs, cool. Training camp, cool. Because I know they're hitting each other in training camp. When you're going up against a live competition who will likely be playing a little extra harder because they're trying to solidify their 53-man roster spot, it's different. And some guys rise – and, they're the cream of the crop and they rise to the occasion and other guys fall back. And, that's why you start the roster out with 90-plus people in the preseason. Then you have to trim that fat off of, the steak.
Yeah.
A lot of the guys, they're not going to look as good as a lot of people think. And, I don't know if that's just a product of just watching practice and them only being in helmets and say, oh, man, like since they can't tackle each other, they look good. Like this player was here and he's making a bunch of plays. So I'm just saying, keep an open mind when you're watching these preseason games because it's one thing to look great in shorts and a t-shirt, and it's another thing to look great week in and week out against the highest level of competition known to this earth.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the part that kind of like it leaves them with the hole. But how big that hole is still yet to be determined because Cam Sutton is a guy proven. We know that there's no worries with him. No matter where he's going to play well. Joe Hayden, proven. James Pierre, not really proven, but we have a lot of upside, and we saw a lot of upside on the field at the end of last season. Antoine Brooks, giant question mark all over the field. Arthur Millette really has never proven himself in the NFL. Trey Norwood, if he's good, if he could tackle, if he's, if his 180-pound frame doesn't break on impact, he's going to be fine. But that is the question mark. I think the whole defense comes down to Trey Norwood, not Antoine Brooks, not anybody else. Trey Norwood and how well he can adjust to the NFL level. Because if he does, there's no need for any of the rest of them. Just let Trey Norwood be the backup everywhere. But if he can't, then the Steelers got to start looking at Millette, Antoine Brooks, and things are going to get weird. Miles Killebrew's another one. Weird.
So let me say something, and I want to get your reaction to it. Losing Mike Hilton sucks, right? Right.
So
we basically this year are going to see how far the Steelers secondary can drop without the presence of Mike Hilton. I think the question this year is how close can the Steelers close that gap to their secondary without Mike Hilton as opposed to having Mike Hilton in it? Because Mike Hilton did so much for the defense. He's one of the best slot corners in the game. Losing him was a very big blow, and not a lot of people are going to see that until the first couple of weeks of the season. Do you think the Steelers can maintain the same level of secondary play without Mike Hilton? Because I'm sitting here and I'm just like, I still don't know.
Yeah, definitely. I think they can but I think it all depends on who's going to be where. And that's what I mean. And I'll address this while I address you. Somebody said that's insane. Trey Norwood doesn't determine anything. He does not determine anything on this football team. What he does is he lowers that gap. He closes that gap between how big of a loss it is to lose Mike Hilton, because Cam Sutton can replace Mike Hilton. We both know that. We both have a ton of confidence. And a lot of people around this hype train with James Pierre feel that he can be an outside guy to replace Steven Nelson. So there's the secondary, not a huge drop off, feeling pretty good about it. But where you lose is you lose the dime backer. You lose the backup safety. You lose the guy that could play on the outside behind Joe Hayden and Steven Nelson, who was Cam Sutton. So now you need to replace him. Replacing Mike Hilton is one thing. I think it's a lot easier than replacing Cam Sutton because it's hard to find a quality depth piece in the secondary, especially if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Trey Norwood, if he is that guy, huge. If he's not that guy, that's where the question marks start and probably finish on how good this defensive secondary can be.
I think I don't want to say underrated. I think a very big part of how big the Steelers secondary can grow heading into this year is going to be Terrell Edmunds. And that's good, but that's also kind of bad because Edmunds, as you know, he's got 3 years underneath his belt now. Should he be able to take those strides and, kind of reach the next level of his play? I think, at least on the back end of the secondary, a lot of plays can be made. A lot of plays can happen should Terrell Edmunds turn it up a notch. The unfortunate thing is I feel like Terrell Edmunds kind of is what he is. He's not Minka. He's not going to be playing center field for the defense. He functions much better around the box and, kind of getting in the backfield, making tackles, almost acting as a fifth linebacker for the Steelers, honestly, sometimes. I think if Terrell Edmunds improved his ball skills at all, even a fraction of what they're at right now, I think the Steelers' playmaking abilities would tenfold increase. I think their probability to create turnovers game to game would increase tenfold. And I think the development of Terrell Edmunds into a full modern safety would be phenomenal. However, like I said earlier, I think at this point he kind of is what he is.
I agree. And this is a good question. And I think that I could answer both from Nick and you at the same time. So, or I could respond to you and answer Nick at the same time. Terrell Edmunds is definitely that guy that can easily make or break this secondary. I think we've known that for 3 years now because he's not really like he's like a top tier average player. But I think he plays a little out of his comfort zone. And I think that all changes if the Steelers secondary can adjust. Like the biggest thing with signing Malik Hooker would have been to allow Terrell Edmunds to move around more, to play in the box more, where he's more comfortable. Where now he has to always play back and he doesn't always make plays. And as we know, his ball coverage skills are subpar at best. He could be there, and he took a major leap last season, but he's got to take an even bigger leap this year. I think the Steelers want to find a way to play him more in the box this season, which will allow him to, one, cover people that he's more comfortable covering. He'll probably be better in coverage overall when he has to cover shorter routes rather than dropping back all the time and play in the middle of the field. And if they can figure that whole thing out, he's a guy that fits that dime hybrid linebacker, safety, whatever that the Steelers have been looking for 5 years now. And yeah, maybe it does earn him a new contract. But as of right now, playing strong safety, no, the Steelers would easily go out and get a new guy next year because it's easy to find another Terrell Edmunds.
Yeah, and I don't think the Steelers are going to stress themselves out either way. You know, I think they're going to let 2021 unfold. And, you know, if Edmunds proves to – play at a high level. Obviously, I think the Steelers have to walk into that negotiation room and throw an offer on the table. But I don't think they're necessarily going to break the brink at all. Especially extending TJ, especially probably hopefully extending Minka next offseason. There's a lot of moves the Steelers need to make. Granted, the cap space is supposed to jump up. Supposedly, we'll see about that.
Yeah,
but
it's going to be better.
Good.
Malik Hooker was a free agent until a week ago. Malik Hooker's twice the safety that Terrell Edmunds is. So, it's easy to get a guy like that. Easy. And the Steelers, I think, are past the whole we're going to go sign Morgan Burnett stage. I think they've realized that those were busts. Now it's time to find younger guys. And, I mean, again, maybe it's Trey Norwood. I'm talking too much about Trey Norwood in this podcast, but maybe it's Trey Norwood. I don't know.
I mean, you never know until you get the shot. And I feel like if Edmunds doesn't have a new contract, Trey Norwood might get that shot next year. We'll see. Maybe the Steelers will go out and sign like a stopgap in free agency. Maybe to go and draft somebody.
Exactly.
Never really know. But I think at the end of the day, the Steelers aren't too worried about it. The situation is going to figure itself out. But speaking of situations that really need to figure themselves out, the Steelers' offensive line has not gotten 5-star reviews through the early stages of training camp. Even through the offseason, a lot of people were saying how not great the Steelers' offensive line was, and you got into the arguments of whether or not they should have drafted Najee or, an offensive tackle. Nonetheless, we are here a few days removed from the first preseason game of the season. Noah, what are your thoughts on Steelers' offensive line? Should we be running for the hills? Do you think we're overreacting? What do you think?
First off, shout out to my man. Steelers O-line is absolute garbage.
Fitting name. Love it.
With the Steelers will force 4 turnovers on Thursday night. We're holding you to that. If you're here Friday morning, 9 a.m., if this is right, you're getting a shout out. Steelers offensive line. Should we be running for the hills? Yes. The man's YouTube or the person's YouTube name, whatever he chooses to be, is exactly what it is. Garbage. The Steelers are working with, we laughed at this last episode, but it's now becoming more and more concerning. Rashad Coward is going to start at guard in the Hall of Fame game. He's going to do it. He's going to do it. It's not like I hope he, maybe he doesn't. No, it's going to happen. And then you have Kendrick Green, who looks excellent at training camp. No tackles. We haven't seen Chooks or Zach Banner yet, so you're working with Joe Haig and Dan Moore Jr., who looks like a stick out there. The man is as stiff as a board. And maybe Trey Turner, but I don't know how much they're going to put Trey Turner on the field in the Hall of Fame game because you lose Trey Turner, you're working with Rashad Coward and BJ Finney. We're past this. There's nothing left. They're picking from scraps, so – I mean, yeah, the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line is a screaming concern. It's the most concerning thing on this entire football team by a mile. But maybe that changes when Zach Banner and Chooks are on the field. Maybe it doesn't. That's the toughest part is I don't know what to expect because we haven't seen them.
So here's my thing. And I like Zach Banner a lot personally because he's given me the green line on a couple interviews, and I'll always be thankful for that. And we haven't really seen him get the opportunity to start a full slate of games for the Steelers, so we really don't know what he can do, But if we're asking for guys like Banner and a core forward to move the needle for our offensive line, not looking great. Not cool. No.
That's exactly where it is.
Granted, Kendrick Green looks like a stud.
He does.
He's probably the best center in the draft, and he will make me look very, very stupid for wanting to draft a handful of other centers over him. But granted, obviously I'm not being paid for those decisions, and Steelers are. That being said, he said, "I'll be here, boys." Haha, yes.
My man.
9 a.m. Eastern time, Friday. We will be here with live reactions from the Steelers' first preseason game and live reactions to the Steelers' offensive line. But Joe Haeg didn't get phenomenal reviews whenever he signed with Pittsburgh.
Nope.
Dan Moore is obviously a project, and he's looking like the project you're doing like super late at night, like right before you go to bed. So you're just trying to throw something together.
Yeah.
Trey Turner, maybe. We'll see.
Maybe. 5-time Pro Bowler. I mean, he's got potential, but like it all. And then Kevin Dotson. That's the scary one. What did Kevin Dotson do that he's still not practicing? Chooks is the other one, but I don't know. At this point, for how much talking Kevin Dotson has done, responding to the in shape stuff, I really wish he could be on the field because he is the question mark. We know what Chooks can do, and we expect him to do a little bit more at left tackle. But what Kevin Dotson could do this season will probably change the offensive line.
Yeah, and I think that was the expectation after losing, 3 to 5 starters from the offensive line last year. You're looking at Kevin Dotson, the guy who showed a lot of promise in 2020, the guy who should have started every single game in 2020. It's like, okay, like you're the guy. Like you are the guy heading to your second season, not only for, just the spot at left guard, but the entire offensive line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the next Marquise Pouncey.
For him to not be there, obviously it brings worries. And granted, the entire scheme of the preseason, like I said, 4 games, give it time, I guess. But man, like it only looking to this Thursday, yikes.
And that's it's already week 1 of the preseason. Like the Steelers have 3 more weeks to mesh a brand new starting 5 at the offensive line together. The offensive line is chemistry. It's 75% chemistry. And they have 5 guys who have never started with each other that are going to start a football game at week 1 of a regular season in 4 weeks. So I don't know. Like they need to be on the field. Zach needs to be on the field. Chooks needs to be on the field. Dotson needs to be on the field because until they are, this entire offensive line is going to be very scary week 1, and that's going to leave a bunch of concerns. Now, granted,
we're also talking about a team who, historically speaking, and I say that with it happening every single year, historically speaking, the team in general comes out to a very slow start to begin the season. In the first couple of weeks, I feel like we've been saying this for years now. Is it because starters don't play a lot in the preseason? Is it because they don't have that time to kind of mesh and gel? But granted, they were getting off the slow starts whenever the Steelers had probably the best offensive line in the NFL a handful of years ago. So how's that going to work whenever a handful of guys aren't practicing with each other right now? How is that going to work when a lot of the guys who you expect to be starters aren't even about to play in the first preseason game? Like there's legitimately a lot of questions. And like our man said, no way we'll be dead last in the NFL, right? I don't think the offensive line is that bad. However, it's also going to be not that good. And, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say that on the football field, everything starts and finishes with the offensive line. And if the Steelers want to do anything this year, they are going to need that offensive line to improve night and day from what we think is going to be right now.
Yep, exactly. That's what that's all it comes down to. Pittsburgh Steelers, there's question marks everywhere. And we just talked about the secondary, whatever. It's the offensive line. And if the offensive line doesn't get together and they get healthy, it's all about health at this point. If they get healthy, there's a lot of upside. But until they get healthy, all you're looking at it, and all you can do is look at it and go, Rashad Coward is your starting left guard, and Dan Moore is about to start at left tackle, and Ben Roethlisberger is trying to win a Super Bowl. They don't match up. None of those equal the same thing. So it's concerning, and it's going to be concerning until people are back healthy and on the field, and that's just the end of the story, basically.
Finally, Noah, we've said it about 20 times. Steelers Cowboys this Thursday. broadcasted. I believe it'll be on NBC. I'll have to double check that.
I believe it will be as well.
Nonetheless, broadcasted for the entire country to see the Steelers and Cowboys. What do you expect? What are some things you're looking for? I know we talked briefly about Ben Roethlisberger probably not even playing in the game. Do you still think that is true? What things are you looking for?
I was asked the other day if I expect the Steelers main players to be on the field on Thursday. I don't expect a lot of them. TJ's not going to play. Stephon Tuitt's not going to play. Cam Hayward might see a couple of snaps, but that's about it. I don't think Ben Roethlisberger plays, and if he does, I think he plays one series at most. I think it's going to be how good is Mason Rudolph? How good is Dwayne Haskins? And I emphasize the Dwayne Haskins because that's what they're looking for. So that's what I'm looking for, and that's what everybody else should be looking for. Dwayne Haskins is going to have a team under him for maybe a quarter, maybe 2 quarters, who knows, and he's going to get to run the show. That's what Steelers fans are looking for. So that's obviously part one. Part two, Mason Rudolph. What has Mason Rudolph done from the Browns game to now, and how much better or worse has he gotten? Obviously, Najee Harris, we're going to get to see Najee Harris. That's awesome. And then the offensive line and how good these backups can be and how bad can these backups be. That's really what I'm looking for.
I'm looking for a lot of young guys to kind of get their first taste of NFL action and kind of see how they handle it. And, for better or worse, I think we need to remember that this is going to be their first taste of NFL football. So, things exactly might not go their way. And I think that's okay. I think that's why you play preseason games. I think that's why you don't make judgments on the player after the first year in the NFL, for better or worse. You just don't. But nonetheless, I think the most important thing I'm looking forward to is the offensive line. What guys are going to be able to step up, because like you said, not all the starters are going to be there. This is the opportunity for a lot of those guys who are kind of those mid-tier second string players to really make it known to the coaching staff that they can play football. They can play football. And I think my comment said a little bit earlier this week, everything's open. Everything is open. If you can play at your position, you are going to compete for reps.
Yeah, and that's what it's going to come down to. And there's a lot of competitions out there. I mean, there's a lot of backup jobs available. Kalen Ballage is a guy that I want to see on the football field because I think he's better than Jalen Samuels. And I get that's a 4th string guy, but it's a 4th string guy. At the same time, Anthony McFarland has been all over the field at training camp. So where is he going to line up, and how many different positions are the Steelers going to utilize him at? There's just so much that goes into these backup jobs, just like you said. And the year 2 jumps, the year 1 guys, the unproven free agents that are coming in here. There's a ton. And at the end of the day, Thursday might be the most exciting playoff or preseason game we see yet, because the Steelers are going to come out here with so much new, and they're going to throw it at our faces and try to excite us.
Well, let's not forget, this is also the Hall of Fame game. So there's a handful of Steelers being inducted into the Hall of Fame. There's also going to be a handful, more than a handful of Steelers fans there. It's going to feel like a home game for them. So, I'm hoping the crowd can bring a little bit of juice to those guys and just make a preseason game an exciting atmosphere. Yeah,
that's the other thing, is there's going to be fans there. You best believe Mike Tomlin is bringing everything he's got to this football game. He's looking at it going, we want everybody screaming all the time, and that's going to be exciting. But, it'll lead to a lot. It'll lead to a lot of mistakes as well. It's just about it's about looking at the detail and seeing who's better at fine-tuning that detail than others. That's what this first game is going to tell us.
Dude, I can see it now. Haskins takes the first snap, throws an interception or something, and then the social media just lights itself on fire, and all of a sudden the Steelers have to go and trade for Aaron Rodgers next year.
That's if Dwayne Haskins takes the first snap. Twitter might literally explode. It's going to be a good time.
Might literally explode. But you know what? If it does, we will be here to pick up the pieces of Twitter exploding Friday morning at 9 a.m. 9 a.m. Eastern, We will be live. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been another phenomenal episode of All Steelers Talk. Go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel, All Steelers Talk. Give us a like on Facebook, All Steelers on Sports Illustrated. Follow us on Twitter at SI_Steelers. Follow me on Twitter at Donnie and Druin. Follow Noah on Twitter at Noah Strack. Visit our work at SI.com/NFL/Steelers or just visit AllSteelers.com for the latest news, updates, and more on your Pittsburgh Steelers. My name is Donnie. His name is Noah, and we will see you on Friday.